so let's get started. This is a quick demo to explore some of the techniques in using this image given for free use by Dan Seitzinger. And what I'll do is I'll take a quick look at it. We could save this as a file. We could then open it and do some magic with that. But I'll also reveal that I'm sometimes really lazy, and I will not save this to a file. I'll simply right click and say copy image. Now you have to be looking at the image directly, but once you have that option, you can view the image perhaps first in your browser, and if it is what you want, you can copy this entire image. All right, so that said, we can create something like this. We want to load that image in here. So typically that means we do something like Control V, because we've just copied it from the browser. It's now in the clipboard. Control V will give you options to paste it into the current image. If it's the same dimension, it's a perfect fit. If it's not, you have a couple of other options there. First thing you'll want to do is to store it. So let me hide all these and show a few things we'll want to do. In fact, we'll use this simply as a sky. So I'm going to need to create a safe, somewhat safe backup copy here so we can get to this back and forth. And one thing we'll do is to actually use it as a sky. We'll make it the custom brush, and I'll explain quickly why. So I'm going to render some sort of a sky here, render plasma noise, not a sky, rather actually an elevation map. Right? So that will be our elevation map. And I'll simply make it seamless, and then perhaps I'll do another round for the elevation map, and again plasma noise, render the plasma noise, this time in a different mode. Under the mode I'll go to difference mode, and that often will reveal some sort of a carved out canyons or river paths, river canyons, stuff like that. So let's click a few times until we have something we like. And you know what? We never get there because we are demanding, aren't we? All right, let's just use this one here and expand the dynamic range. So we have now an elevation map that's going to be interesting with some deep carved valleys and river beds, and then we have some higher elevations, and we can perhaps even add some erosion to that. Let's skip that. That's a different tutorial. Let's go use that as the elevation map. And what do we need to do to use this as the sky image? All right, so first of all, let's see what happens when we simply render it under the PuppyRay GPU. Of course, we have our elevation map here. It's rendering, but we don't see our sky. Oh, no, actually we do. Well, that's because I did something before. Let's go undo that. And what you see is if the sky is one of the presets, you will have about 16 or so presets, 15 I think. But there is one more here, and that's a custom brush. So the trick is to actually make it go into the custom brush. Then that sky becomes, that image from the custom brush becomes the sky you see here. All right, so how do we do that? Let's go and explore. This is the image that we want in the custom brush. Well, we simply go to the brush menu and copy select it as brush. Right, so that puts it into the brush. We can see a stored copy of that simply here, store and manage a copy. So here it is in the brush. We can look at the film strip. There's only one image. It's not an animated brush in this case. That's okay. What we may want to do is, well, first see what part of that actually gets displayed on in render. So when we go back to that elevation map and we click here to have this as the custom brush, we can go to the render, transform PuppyRay GPU, and now the problem is that the sky is way up there, right? So we actually use the entire image, not just the central horizontal line here to the top, not just the upper part, but the entire image is supposed to represent the sky, and it isn't, because that image was actually used to render, from the horizon line down, and also to the pole up above our heads. So what we need to do is actually use this and use just the upper part, right? And then perhaps reposition it, or maybe scale it up or something like that. So I'll go the easy route. I'll simply let's see, what is the easy route? I'm going to use the selection tool first and say, let's go select about this much, right? So all the way down to the fog at the horizon. And then I'm going to crop to that selection. We can do crop to selection. And actually, you know what? We don't even need to do that. All we need to do is pick it up as a custom brush, right? Just this part now. So let's copy selected as brush. And we can always enable the brush while we have the brush tool selected. We can preview the brush and then we can see it. So now we don't have the bottom part. We only picked up the upper part. All right, so that's our brush. Let's do a store copy of that. It's not perfect yet. And we can certainly get rid of this one, or at least minimize it away. The thing that's not perfect is that it's not seamless, right? If we were to paint this side and then this side on the other, it's likely, yeah. See, it's got the bluish tint here, and it doesn't have on this side, so it's gonna show a seam if we look in that direction where that seam is. So what we want to do is turn it first into a seamless brush. So go to the brush menu and select Make Seamless. All right, so with that, you can see how much overlap you want horizontally, that's left to right, and how much vertically. Now, vertically, we don't care necessarily. You may not look up at the top above us, so it doesn't matter so much what happens at the top. If it does, you can give it a little bit of overlap there, but especially sideways, you may want to do that. All right, so let's keep that, and we now have a brush that is seamless, and we can store that one. And we know we can use that one. We can get rid of the other one. We can use this stored image or this stored brush as the custom brush, the current brush, and we're not going to use it to paint, but it's going to be used in the renderer for the sky in the background. So let's go do that. Let's put our elevation map back in. We don't need to see the preview of the brush. We can now simply, in fact, we can also make the image of the elevation map seamless too. All right, so make seamless there, why not? And store that as our better improved elevation map, and perhaps even add some erosion. Let's do that another time. Let's go simply render now, transform, puppy ray, GPU. And so now the sky is still this one down here, but without the bottom half that was showing below the horizon. And so now as we render, we have the sky stretched all across here. If we look at the top, if we rotate the camera to look at the top, we might see a little bit of a pole here. We didn't try to fix that. That's okay. We probably will not see it. We are going to look down. We're going to look where the sun is also. And that's a perfect image there. We can extend the fog level a little bit. Now, if we extend it too far, it's going to show that this is actually a point light at a limited distance, and we can move it back further, back into that direction, so that it really appears to be behind the limit of the fog. With the right button, we can move it up. We can also make more options here, such as make that sun really bright. Maybe something like this. That's a big sun, maybe a little bit too big. Let's go with something like this, maybe a little bit more reddish on the coloring, right, which will make it an interesting contrast with the bluish tint that we have in Dan's sky, right? And so that's the first step to create a rendering with the illumination coming from that sky. We have the illumination from the sun itself as well, but most importantly, we also have some illumination here in this part. It's not dark. If we turn it off, if we turn global illumination off, then you see it's off, and it gets really dark because the only light source is the sun to our left. But if we want it to be a little bit more conducive to lighting in reality, we enable the global illumination, and there we go. So that's the first step into adding your own background sky. And of course, we may want to do next step is perhaps to animate it or make it more dynamic, perhaps add a little bit of twist to that. So let's see what else we can do to take it further. I'm going to try to do a final render here, maybe a little bit higher cliffs, but then bring them down so that they seem to be steeper but also still submerged in water. Let's enable the transparency and refraction of the water. give it a little bit more bluish tint there, and maybe a little bit more wide angle so we see more of the sky from Dan. And maybe I'm gonna go just stick with that, add a little bit of better type of water reflections, some riverbed on the bump maps. Let's see what that looks like so far. Let's give it a better quality rendering. I am on a fairly slow system, I must say, so it's gonna take a little while to do our final render. But here we can see it's starting to show pretty nice. And okay, so let's give it the final render. I'm gonna go and have a coffee or something until it's it's rendered, and we can select the high quality render or the final render, or we can fiddle with some of these parameters. Make sure you uncheck the anti-aliasing first, so as you are fiddling, it's not going to take too long to render. Right, so with because with anti-aliasing it's doing so many passes. Here we have just one. Let's say I'm gonna go. Why not? Let's do 200 passes. Right, might as well. 234. Very high rendering quality, and probably way too much of an overkill here. I'm gonna give it a little bit more height on the waves. Let's say 3 units. And I think everything else we can leave. Perhaps software shadow samples. Let's do some soft shadows. Let's do something like 13 or 12. GI quality. Let's increase that a little bit. I think that's just about all we need. So let's go render this final. Go to anti-aliasing, and that may in many times trigger the rendering, because it has some of these will automatically re-render right away whenever you make a change, but we didn't want that for the anti-aliasing on. Now with the anti-aliasing on, we can click it and we'll be back as soon as this is rendered. And there it is, just finished rendering. All right, so let's go and store that. A couple of ways to proceed at this point. You could go to the File menu and save it as a standard PNG file, JPEG, TIFF, a couple of formats to choose from. Certainly as an image, we'd like to recommend you store an image copy. That's the same thing as if you go to the little icon, mini icons at the top right. So storing an image copy will not keep you safe with this. It's not on the hard drive, it's in memory, but it's safer than, for instance, if you mess it up, you can click and restore it. But there's also another thing you might want to do, and that is to store it copy it back to the clipboard. Right, and then there's of course a couple of other ways. You can save it, the standard file save menu. There's export options. There's a general file converter, and that one's pretty interesting too, because it essentially launches a little plugin, and in that plugin it grabs a copy of the image you currently have. So now it's in its own space, and you can from here go and save it. You can also do a bunch of other things. You can zoom to fit. You can even there's a couple of image adjust colors, a couple of things there. But so yeah, that's basically it. At this time we have used this image in the background, this beautiful sky, as a new background for our use here. All right, thanks for watching. We'll do a few more things. We'll animate the water, we'll animate the sky, we'll animate the camera, and a bunch of other things.